Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is the YouTube video. The stream, if you watch the stream, that's going to be unlisted. There are a bunch of technical difficulties, very awkward. But now today, here I am with Philosophical Zombie Hunter. We're going to chat a little bit. Let's get right into this. Sorry about all the technical stuff, but yeah, let's get into it.
Hello, Garrett's listeners or viewers.
Hello.
How are you all?
Good. We're doing great. I love watching Garrett's videos and all this
that's good
cringe.
to hear.
Yeah.
That's
We're
good to
doing
hear.
great. All my viewers are prepubescent boys, so and
Oh,
girls.
dear.
So that's what you get when you talk about
Well,
objectivism.
it worked.
Though.
It worked for PewDiePie, so who can complain?
Absolutely. But yeah, I guess how's your day been going so far?
Yeah. I'm mostly it's okay. I had some issues at work that I resolved, and now I'm doing my late night 11 p.m. discussions with people in the US
Oh yeah, this
to
is
see, to get the finger on the pulse in the objectivist YouTube community
yeah
directly from the source, Garrett.
absolutely. I am the pulse.
And you are going to tell me how the YouTube objectivist community is doing. Is it flatlining, Garrett? Is everything going pear-shaped?
I don't
Or
know.
are we doing actually okay?
I don't know. I don't know about the actual community. I haven't actually kept up my attention too much with it apart over the past year when I wasn't streaming too much. But it seems
Okay.
as of recently, since I started paying attention again after I made my video, it's like, wow, there's a lot of actual drama going on again. It's like I am the cause of the drama, but
And why is that, Garrett?
because in a recent video, I basically explained why I don't consider myself an objectivist anymore. And after that, we have Diego's response, which I actually just watched today. And I was
Okay.
talking with him a little bit about that right before our stream. And yeah, so yeah, that was the main thing going on, what it seems in the objectivist community. And yeah, I guess, I don't know, you messaged me saying that you wanted to talk about that, so I guess here we are
Yeah.
now. So, yeah, I think the main critique that I've heard, and
Mm-hmm.
this is one that Diego talks about a lot, is that I'm not criticizing objectivism, I'm criticizing the ideologues in it, certain people within objectivism, which, yeah, I think that a lot of that video, it does come across that way, which is probably my own fault, because I generally spend a lot of my time talking about tendencies I see within the movement. However, I think the main point of what that video was supposed to be, which I don't know if I think I forgot this final leap almost in it, where it was explaining all the problems with ideology, explaining a lot of problems that I see within objectivism, and then making that jump to here's how this is caused by objectivism. Because I do think that there are certain senses in which objectivism promotes a dogmatic view. I think, namely, the main cause of this, and I talked about this in DMs with Diego a little bit, is the idea that objectivism is this closed system of principles, and I think that idea can be pretty dangerous because it leads to people treating objectivism like they hear this philosophy, they see something good in it, and then they go into it and start researching it, and it's like, oh, hey, this philosophy is really valuable, but to believe in it, to be an objectivist, I have to accept all of it, and as this sort of closed system, and then it leads them to accept a lot of things that they don't really have verification for, and then it causes them to go back and verify that later. And I think this closed system, this objectivism is a whole system thing, is very explicitly promoted by people like Rand and Peikoff. So I think that justification, that I see a lot of objectivists going into objectivism very dogmatically and not actually verifying those principles right away, there's a reason for that. I think if you see a certain ideology causes dogmatism in a lot of people, I think there's reason to investigate what could be causing that, what in that ideology might be wrong. But yeah, I've gone on for a while, so if you have anything you wanted to say after that.
Yeah, I'd like to narrow in on something that you said. So let me try to see if I can explain it in my own words. So this is something that I've noticed, and I've heard other people uh, who've mentioned it before with regards to objectivism. And I think, am I right to say, sorry, that the thing you find issue is this kind of habit that objectivists have, that we categorize, we take the essentials of something, we categorize it very broadly, and it seems from the outside like a sort of perhaps ideologue, but people don't know the path from A to Z. So to them, to them, it just seems like you jumped from something that's very nuanced and very complicated to something oversimplified and like a whole category that it may or may not fit in.
Exactly. I
So,
think
for example, someone will say something, will say, "Well, this is collectivist nonsense."
exactly. I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's you get these like broad principles from objectivism from Rand and Peikoff or whatever, and you hear them and then you start like thinking only in terms of those principles rather than in terms of reality, and it kind of affects like I mean, I go into the video a lot. Like it affects like conversations that you have. It affects the way that you interact with other ideas as well, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I would say that, I mean, we do have something like that, but typically like in Rand's essays or in Peikoff's audio lectures, he does explain how he gets from A to Z, and he doesn't just jump into it.
Yeah,
But
but
I can appreciate that if someone on YouTube just jumps into it, and then everyone else around them is like their head is spinning, they don't understand how they reached that. But do you think that objectivism in and of itself and the way that it is taught, does it encourage this behavior? You think it's inherent to the philosophy or not really?
yeah, I think that just the way it's presented as this closed system where you accept all or nothing. And yeah, it's true that like Peikoff does like give an explanation when describing these principles, but you're not really motivated to be critical of that explanation. You're motivated when accepting objectivism, hearing it's a closed system, you accept all or nothing. You're motivated to hear that explanation and then find all the reasons that you can to accept that one and to ignore other explanations that come from other sources because those sources are demonized by people like Wren and Peikoff. They're called subjectivists, empiricists, rationalists, all these sort of things. So these other people might have
Wait,
perfectly good explanations as well, but the
wait,
issue
wait,
is that sorry.
1 second, sorry, because I can only retain three things at a time. So yeah, let's just say this. So when you study objectivism at the OAC, for example, we have a UK Ayn Rand UK study group, and we can ask these things. Sometimes we are critical. Are you saying that we're not critical in those settings, or are you saying that because we disregard other philosophers throughout history, that it seems like those philosophers have nothing to offer, and that insulates us as objectivists from other thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's probably that latter thing because you can ask questions about objectivism and like you're allowed to do that, but this sort of implicit assumption is like if you ask those questions, there's something that you don't get yet. There's something that objectivism understands that you need to go and ask an intellectual about, and then you're like trying to just find something to grasp onto that they say that will like alleviate the problem that you find with objectivism or whatever. So like with the, I personally don't think a lot of the intellectuals are terrible, and I enjoy the OAC, and I think that they do have a decent approach, but I still think there's still this assumption that like if you go to office hours, you go to ask a question and then they clarify it for you, and then now you agree with objectivism. Now that's sort of like the assumption that I notice.
I don't know. I mean, I get the idea that it is entirely possible that I in our study group may not know everything, and there's a lot of things that we do in the study group is we go over a lot of Peikoff's lectures.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, for example, we had a really long one about proving objectivism through induction. And I recall that they really didn't want you to just accept anything. You had to prove it to yourself, and you had to use examples from your life to reach that conclusion. And a lot of times we hear the answer, but it takes us like many months to fully understand it. So, for example, your life as a standard of value is still difficult, for me to some degree, and other people to fully absorb and appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
And it
But
is. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I guess. But do you see how like in that process of trying to like learn about the philosophy, you're like already implicitly accepting that those things are true, but now you're like trying to come up with an explanation almost post hoc to justify those things. So like in the discussion groups, for example, I don't actually know the specifics, but from what it sounds like you're explaining to me, you guys listen to a lecture and then you hear these principles, and then once you hear the principles, then you go out and try to look for things that verify them. And I think that process is kind of backwards, if that makes sense, because I mean, I do think you do have to probably hear an idea from a philosopher before like accepting it or verifying it, but you shouldn't like go in with the assumption that something's already true, because I guess go ahead. I've been talking for a little bit.
I don't know. So I would say that I have tried other things before, thinking about it before starting objectivism, and I guess I have a bit more life experience that I'm mapping what I'm being taught in objectivism to. And again, I guess I'm doing a lot of the talking here, and I kind of wanted to hear your opinion, but I'll just finish with this observation that I have. So I understand what you're saying in regard to they're teaching you objectivism, and you're assuming it's true, and you're trying to map it onto reality, post hoc or a priori. But I would say this: I have tried other philosophies, and I did take the assumption like maybe they have some truth in those approaches or philosophies or ideologies or something. And at some point, I just could not map it onto reality, and I eventually left them. I haven't had that situation yet with objectivism, and I'm not like a devout. I'm not like a religious about it, quote unquote. I live my life, and if it's helpful, I use it. So far, it's been helpful.
Yeah, I think that's probably. I mean, that sounds like the right approach for the most part. I think the issue comes because I feel like you also, from like what I've heard, because I listened to your talk with what was their name, Casperanza or whatever.
Casperanza.
Yeah, and at the end you talked about how like veganism is like could be objectivist. So I mean that's a clear disagreement with Rand. So I don't know if you're necessarily falling into the trap of like being an objectivist who like accepts every.
This is really going to be about me, then, isn't it? This is going to be about me.
Oh man, I guess you can ask questions too if you want. I guess more of what I'm trying to do is like try to understand you as an objectivist, I guess, because I don't actually know if you're like a dogmatic objectivist. I just don't think I don't think I can call myself an objectivist because I don't really agree with all of the philosophy, in the sense that like objectivism is a system, and to believe in objectivism you should accept all the tenets, if that makes sense.
Well, I would say that I don't think Rand or Peikoff wants you to believe in everything. I think they want you to, and I'm pretty sure that they were against that idea. They had, Peikoff specifically had all these things where they want you to ask questions. They don't want you to believe anything. They want you to be convinced and you to reach the conclusion that it's helpful for you. But with regards, I'll give you two examples. So I am vegan. I was vegan before I started learning objectivism. I'm a student of objectivism. I'm not an expert by any stretch, and I've only been studying it for some time. I probably maybe even less than you have, Gary. I do believe that I can be vegan within objectivism, specifically
Mm-hmm.
through virtue ethics. I acknowledge that there isn't, or the argument is difficult or maybe weak with regards to animals having outright rights
Mm-hmm.
to be left alone. But I see no issues with me not wishing to harm animals, because it violates my values and violates my virtues of now that I know where my food came from,
Mm-hmm.
then me not doing something about from my point of view, and it's an individual position, that if I were to eat animals now, it will violate my virtue of integrity, honesty, and justice. So I choose not to. But with
Mm-hmm.
regards to other elements like science around it, I have done a lot of research into nutritional studies, and I do believe they are quite sound.
Mm-hmm.
So I can make like a claim through that. And the only issue with objectivism, it's not really an issue, but the course of rights and how rights are given in a quote unquote natural or objective way
Mm-hmm.
through, and which I also makes very good sense to me. It's difficult to give those to animals, but with regards to being vegan, I don't see a conflict from the path of me not wanting to violate my values. I would add I would add something to the Casperanza video. So I gave Casper advice to with regards to the way he views objectivism, that it's too perfect, or it has very, very high expectations, and if you don't live up to those expectations, if you're not John Galt, if you're not Reardon actively, then Casper would consider himself unsuccessful in some sort of way. And I said, you're being too harsh on yourself. The idea is to
Mm-hmm.
live your life. So from my point of view, an incremental approach to the path you want to get to, the values you want to obtain, but a consistent one is a good approach. You live your life, you improve slightly every day, the productivity hacks or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
You achieve something, and after a while, you let's say you start a job in some kind of place, and you consistently work there every day, and after a while you made like your own little corner,
Mm-hmm.
which you've contributed something to the office, something to the company, and something to people outside the company, and it kind of feels good. It feels
Mm-hmm.
like you've achieved something,
Yeah.
and or what Rand may call metaphysical efficacy. um, and I think that's healthy and positive, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that incremental plus consistent is heavily underrated.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, I think I agree mostly with, I mean, ethics is the entire reason I was interested in objectivism to begin with. So I think still a lot of those principles, and I don't think objectivism is like too harsh. You have one life. Like there's no there's no such thing as being too harsh on your like ability to achieve happiness. You should always continuously strive to do that, and like I don't know. There should never be like some complacency that sets in. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I think I agree largely with the idea that the objectivist ethics are not like too harsh. I think I'm very pro objectivist ethics. I think.
Okay, well, if you want to see if other philosophers have answers, or you'd like to study them, I mean, to some degree, like even if you listen to, sorry, the history of philosophy from one of the courses there, I mean, I would say it's a good course. I enjoyed it immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe on some cases, like it's just a very short introduction to all the philosophers, so it's the only thing Peikoff can say about them is limited, and could be seen as unnuanced in some
Mm-hmm.
way. But I mean, if you pick one of those that you like, particularly, I'd like to say you like Spinoza,
Mm-hmm.
and you find another book you want to read about them. Look, they had faults, they didn't understand certain things, but something they got very right, and it's
Yep.
super interesting. And I see nothing wrong with learning about other philosophers at all. And I think
Mm-hmm.
to some degree you're encouraged. I studied Kant, but I have to say it's super super difficult
Yep.
to understand Kant. I keep forgetting the core, and then like what I understand, I start arguing with someone about Kant through like because they don't like how Ayn Rand labeled him or categorized him,
Hmm.
and then like everything I say that I understood about Kant and that Ayn Rand says is different, they say no, but Kant said exactly the same thing every single time.
Yep. So yeah, I
Um,
mean, I don't know. I've listened to that history of philosophy course by
okay,
Peikoff, and one interesting thing about that course is I listened to his description of Kant, and when he actually went into the things Kant believed, I'm like, okay, so there's things that I still think are dumb about Kant. Like I think the idea of like an inaccessible noumenal realm is absurd, but um, or I mean maybe not, but no, I think it's probably pretty dumb, but I mean, a lot of things that Kant talks about aren't entirely stupid. The ethics are obviously really stupid, but there's certain parallels between like Kant's definition of objectivity, for example, and like Rand's, and then also I think
yeah, yeah,
there's certain
yeah, I
things,
agree.
and there's certain things with regards to like the noumenal versus phenomenological realms that are kind of similar to some things that it's kind of similar to like the idea of like matter versus form that Rand talks about a little bit. But
I'm not sure about the numeral one specifically, but some of the transcendental idealism, um, you could say the similarities to Rand, obviously not in the a priori sense, but there are some things that overlap.
mm-hmm,
But obviously, there's a key feature that Rand says has a very negative epistemological uh, corruption that just it's not obvious to most people except Rand, but like over time, as you can chart like the course of philosophers like the Romanticists and
mm-hmm,
Hegel and everyone that came after Kant, you can see that it severed a lot of philosophical thought into two. The specifically, if I remember correctly, the imperialists, or sorry, not the imperialists, the logical positivists
mm-hmm,
and the existentialists,
mm-hmm.
which are now continentalists. But I mean, yeah, read the stuff. I encourage you to read the stuff that you are trying to critique. Otherwise, you look like if you do really like philosophy and you start arguing with other people who understand philosophy, they'll just label you as an idiot if you don't know some things about the
Mm-hmm.
people you are critiquing. If you just say, well, they're collectivists, but you haven't read even slightly into them, and there's no nuance into your answer, they'll just label you as just someone who's speaking nonsense. But I, for example, I do a lot of debates, or I used to
Mm-hmm.
anyway, and I actually studied Marx quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, I couldn't just take it like in a way where I listened to the John Ridpath take on Marx. I listened to the Peikoff take on Marx through the History of Philosophy, part two, if anyone missed it. Um, and that's it. I had to actually read. I actually had to read Marx. Then I had to, if I thought I had like an impression, I had to check like in three other places did I get it right, because Marx
Mm-hmm.
wasn't necessarily an idiot. Maybe if I'm underestimating him, then I'll look like an idiot in
Yeah.
front of other people.
Yeah.
And so you go check online like three different university lectures that are available online about what Marx said on this particular issue, and just see if that you got it right and stuff like that. And yeah, I put a lot of effort into it. I did it as a sort of project, and I listed like some things that I critique about what Marxism missed, which turns out afterwards. I didn't realize it at the time, but a lot of things after I made my list, there was a guy called Joseph Schumpeter who said a lot of the things like 70 years before I did,
Huh.
but there was an agreement. So now like it's actually very good from my point of view, because if I go argue with someone, I said, no, it's not just me, it's this very serious heavyweight called Joseph Schumpeter, and he agrees with me, so I must be right. um but yeah, no, it's all interesting, and these are subjects that interest you, or like a very niche element of epistemology, or a very niche element in ethics that you want to investigate further, and you want to see what other people said about it. There's no harm speaking to other philosophy students to some degree, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a bit of harm, but speak to some philosophers to see what they take, be open-minded, listen to what they have to say, do your own research, and come to the
Yeah.
conclusion that you think is the most correct.
Yep, I think I would probably agree with that. I think the issue comes, though, in objectivism when we start to label certain philosophies and then throw them out based on a critique of that label. And I feel like I see that very often in Rand and Peikoff when they talk about different philosophies, or like a tendency they see in the culture, or some like popular figure. So I think that can be very dangerous, because it leads you to a this way of thinking where like objectivism is the right answer, and then you listen to these other philosophies and there's something where they disagree with objectivism on, but rather than try to understand like why they might believe that, you think like, oh, this seems kind of like skepticism, therefore I'm going to debunk this by using the argument that Rand has against skepticism, and then a lot of times it leaves you sounding to like an outside person, and then it makes it so that anybody who isn't familiar with objectivism could never understand the point you're trying to make. And I think that that's dangerous, because then you're kind of just in this realm where you're just circle jerking with people in your philosophy.
I mean, I would say this, but I'll ask you a question at the end. I would say you have a first impression from objectivism about something. Great. Keep it to yourself. Yeah. Do a bit more research. I mean, keep it at the back of your head, but do a bit more research about this particular topic. Because even, if you listen to Greg Salmieri or something, he'll advise the same thing. And then form an opinion. And then, like, if you were wrong about something, if you were right about something, at least you have an opinion and you can base that on. But what I would suggest is don't blurt out the first thing that comes to your head if you don't know what it is, because you take a risk. You take a risk that you sound stupid and you alienate people. But yeah, if objectivism provided you with like a shortcut to something, then if it's useful, use it. But what I would like to ask you now is, do you think that in the YouTube community, let's say, do you think people blurt out the first thing that comes to their head based on like a sort of ideological point of view?
Yeah, I would probably say that. I think a lot of times...
Give me an example.
Oh no, I don't want to like actually attack like very specific people. And I don't have like a certain example that comes specifically to mind, but I guess I love Diego. I'll talk about his video a little bit. Because I feel like a lot of times in that video, I noticed him, I would say something and then he'd say like, oh, this sounds a little bit like skepticism. Oh, you're kind of sounding like an empiricist here. And then like using that and then like conflating me with just different, I guess different, what's the word? Like equating me with like savages, or with people like, what the fuck is that dude's name? The famous pragmatist who like did our schooling system or whatever. Dewey? Yeah. I was having a complete blank out. But yeah, it was just different things like that, where it's like I felt like certain times in the video he didn't really understand the point I was trying to make, because it was like conflated in with a certain ideology. But yeah.
Do you think he didn't understand you correctly and he jumped to a conclusion, or do you think that he made an observation and that is it possible that he sees a connection ahead of you and he's trying to explain it to you?
I think that people hear something and then they think it sounds similar to something that like a skeptic would say, and then they kind of disregard the rest of the argument, because it's a lot simpler to conflate something with a certain ideology that is bad from an objectivist perspective, and then throw it out with that ideology that you like believe is bad, even though like a lot of times these caricatures that Rand portrays of other ideologies in her books, they're just not, they don't make sense, and nobody actually believes the ideas that she's critiquing, it seems like.
I'm sorry, I lost you on that last 3 sentences. What did you mean?
So a lot of times, I guess when Rand talks about other ideologies, maybe there's some like extreme academic that she's heard before talk about them or write like an article about those sort of things, but it's never actually like something that a significant number of people believe.
What does that? What do you mean, like in academia?
Yeah, I guess, or just people in general. Although I think there's a lot of times where, I guess this is another thing. Oh, this is kind of unrelated. I
But
don't know if I want to go into that.
just hold on. Why is it important that other people believe it?
What do you mean?
Is it if other people
Oh,
don't
yeah.
believe?
Oh, because when she's doing that, she's critiquing, like, she's performing polemics a lot of those times when she talks about like skeptics or intrinsicists or stuff like that. She's trying to make a certain group of people, whether it be people who like identify as skeptics in the scientific community or like religious people with like intrinsicist ethics. She's trying to make them appear just completely absurd, so that people don't take those ideas as seriously.
That's an interesting take. So you're saying that because she's so influential or so like a heavy intellectual heavyweight, that
No,
if she
that's not.
says something, if she says something is bad, then people will just not even bother reading it
I think
or
a lot of
looking into it.
objectivists will do that. I definitely think that's the case because if you're told that a certain set of ideas is completely absurd and that there's no value in it constantly by someone like Rand or Peikoff, then what's the use in investigating it? They're
But
just
don't they?
keep reading objectivist literature, keep watching Peikoff's lectures.
But Garrett, won't they explain why it's is that way?
They give an explanation, but that explanation is usually a refutation of a straw man, essentially. So like they'll set up a certain ideology and knock it down and then knock it down based on their absurd representation of it, if that makes sense.
So from your point of view, this looking for essentials has a danger of being oversimplified and therefore, in addition to oversimplifying, strawmanning something.
I don't have
Because
a
part of
problem. I don't
the
have a problem with essentializing something, but I think you need to be very careful about doing that, because if you essentialize something like incorrectly, you can completely lose the plot. So like it's the problem is more so that it's like an oversimplistic essentialization that is created with the motivation of knocking down individuals who may have more like complete ideologies, I guess.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not fully on board. I mean, I can appreciate people who want objectivists for a long period of time to do that, but typically, like with Rand and Peikoff, I find that it's something they've thought about for a long time, and they're giving me the results of the long, long process of thinking on it, and I get to benefit from that at the end. I mean, yes, I can still decide if I agree with it or not. You're saying that some people just take it on faith or conviction.
Well,
Um,
I mean, if the first time you're presented with a certain philosophy is through Rand's characterization of it, why would you want to look further if that's just what how she explains the philosophy?
because I want to understand it better.
I guess, but maybe like not a lot of people are gonna do that because if it's this, like, you're not super encouraged to go and take ideas from other philosophies because objectivism's like this closed. It's a closed system. It's
But
not.
can
It's
I
not something where you're supposed to you accept the whole philosophy or you don't accept it.
can I look at the flip side of not accepting it or not doing it?
What do you mean?
Y- The flip side of not being part of this sort of approach is that everything is disconnected, everything is hyper nuanced. You can't make connections, you can't connect this point and that point because you're just unequipped or it's too complex, or you don't really understand it. And it's kind of like this, a lot of the philosophies we have going now in regular academia, where they're jumping, it's just all over the place. It's like the many in the many. At the very least, with Rand, you're looking for the one in the many. You're attempting to, and you're attempting to make connections, and do concept and form concepts, and then higher level concepts, and also.
Well, I still think you need to make connections, but I don't think you should, like, initially like accept the fact that Rand made those connections correctly, if that makes sense. So like, I mean, it like, you kind of make the assumption that Rand has a consistent philosophy and that all of it is integrated together. She claims that she has done that, but you don't really know that until you can like see those connections. So like, I think it's a lot better to look at like different facts, and maybe at first you have this sort of like disconnected philosophy, but then you need to go in and integrate it afterwards. I don't think that you can like have certain principles and then think, well, for this to be true, this other thing must be true. I don't think that that's a valid way of going about discovering things. You have to discover that both of those things might be true, and then see the connection between those two things later on.
I mean, with regards to your point that Rand said that her philosophy is integrated, I mean, even if she says that, you can't appreciate it until you actually notice integrations between epistemology and ethics and politics and ethics and aesthetics. Unless you actually experience it, it's just like words you heard in a lesson.
Yeah, I think we need to be careful about accepting those connections though right away, because I think a lot of times the reasons why, I know at least for me, like when I accepted a lot of things in objectivism, it was because I was told like, if I want to believe in these ethics, I need to accept this epistemology and this metaphysics and like this politics and all this sort of stuff. But then the issue is, like if I start to see something that is false in that epistemology, or those politics, for example, I feel like if I know the ethics are true, I can reject those other aspects of it, even if I believe that maybe, or even if someone has told me that they're all integrated, I should reject that. I should reject that political principle or epistemological principle in favor of what I actually see in reality, and then try to integrate it after that.
So I think the problem or the difference between you and I is that I started objectivism with a lot of life experience. Too much life experience. And it's a joke between me and Diego. And I'm mapping a lot of the stuff. So when I started reading, for example, Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead, I had this thing like, oh my God, I never saw this connection. How did you realize this? And this is a book from the 50s. This is insane. Like this could be happening right now.
Yep, I definitely with The Fountainhead, I definitely saw that. But yeah, I would agree with that.
It was really interesting because it's like, it's a fictional book in a sense, but it's so close to the reality. You actually try to observe the book and you discuss the book with other people who read it as if it is reality, because it's such like a essentialized view of reality that it's presented in such a clean way. It's like, could this be really reality? Like maybe we should think about it, because it seems mapped very well, at least from my experiences.
Yeah.
And I think when studying objectivism, and I think perhaps because you're in a position when you don't have this life experience to map it on, and you're taking these things to some degree on conviction, or at least that's what you're claiming. And you're saying, well, I don't know because I don't have the life experience, so I can't validate it myself. But with me, I don't have this burning issue that you do.
Yeah, but I think you shouldn't believe those things until you have that knowledge too. Like, I think the issue comes, like, let's say like I'm someone, I read the Fountainhead, I see like this ethics seems amazing. Then I want to go look deeper, and then I go and like read the Objectivist ethics, for example, to understand this better. And then throughout this whole time, she's like explaining like, okay, in order to believe this, you also have to believe all this epistemology or these points in epistemology and metaphysics. And then also like read Atlas Shrugged after that, and it's like, okay, if you believe these ethics, then you also have to believe this politics because of that, because all these things are integrated. And then I think that's...
But can I just point out one thing here though?
Sure.
If you believe in the ethics, you have to practice the ethics, no?
Yeah.
And when practicing it, don't you get like more experience if it's working or not?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that makes sense, because like as long as you're practicing and like verifying the things that you have already, I guess maybe I shouldn't have said verifying, but things that you have already like seen to be true. After that, though, I think a problem comes if you see that these ethics, they are valuable. That's true. But then you start to believe other things, because Rand has told you that in order to believe these ethics that you know are true, you also have to believe all this other stuff that you haven't verified yet, but now you have a motivation to go out and selectively focus on certain aspects of reality in order to verify those new political points. So I think that's where the problem comes in. When it's presented as, to believe these ethics, you need to believe all this other stuff that you maybe haven't verified yet, but after I explain it to you, and once you look out in reality more, you'll see that these are true. I think that's where it becomes a problem.
Are you speaking to Pykov's causation walk?
Maybe it's I mean, that's part of it. We can talk about that if you want, but it's just sort of with
essentially what you're saying, that he...
Yeah, I think that would be an example. Go outside
and see cause and effects and stuff.
Yep. Yeah, it's just that general sort of principle of like, you've seen that this philosophy is true. Here's another thing that you have to accept. Now go out and look and see that that's true. And when you're told to go out and look and see that something's true, you're kind of going to, right?
I don't know, because the cause and effect one is pretty much physics.
Yeah.
So it's essentially saying, look, this is just like in the case of cause and effect, it's as close to reality as it possibly could be. I mean,
oh well, yeah. So I guess specifically, like, I think that was just an example of the method. That was the first thing that came to my mind in that video. I mean, I agree with causality. I just think that method of, you have to go outside and verify that causality exists once you've already been told that it's true and you believe that it's true. I think that's a backwards method, if that makes sense.
No, that's not what happened in the story he told.
Did he not believe in causality before going out?
Yeah, basically. He had all this like philosophy from somewhere else, and he didn't understand cause and effect. And I think she was trying to like, I'm not sure if she was tired of explaining it to him, or he was being exceptionally difficult in replying. But she just kind of told him, well, just go outside, take a walk, and look for things. So you're saying, yeah, you're looking for things. You're wearing like a lens, in the same way, Marxists wear a lens, looking for oppression or stuff like that, or looking for something to verify their ideology. But in this particular case, I mean, if you gave an example of the wind blew and it moved the leaf and stuff. This is as close to reality as possible. This isn't an ideology.
So in that, like, looking at reality, like, that's close to reality, but the issue he's looking at it with a motivation. He's looking at it with the motivation of verifying something. That's like the main problem that I have with it.
He came outside. He went outside because he was arguing that it's not true.
I don't know if
His
that's true. I
motivation
think
was to disprove it.
I thought in that video he was talking about how he like believed in causality because of like some deduction from like A is A. So because everything is what it is, then it must have a nature and it must follow that nature. Like, that was his argument prior to that. And then Rand was like, no, that's like rationalistic. So now go outside and like look and like verify this by what's the word, by induction. I thought that was the
My
beginning.
understanding is that he argued with her about something that he got from his university, and he was perhaps dogmatic from their point of view. And she just said, well, just, oh, sorry, it could be about statistics and the likelihood of something happening. And how do you prove, or how do you get certainty, or I'm not exactly sure. But as far as I understood, or my recollection of him telling the story, is that he was arguing and he wasn't agreeing, and she says, just go outside and do a causality walk and see and connect things in your head in an inductive way. So at least you have observations from reality that you can then build your ideologies on, and not the other way around.
Yeah, I guess
I
think
I could be wrong. Maybe I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Maybe my memory. At my age, maybe my memory is a bit off. I will admit that if I got it wrong, then I apologize. But I understood it as he was arguing, and she just told him, just go outside and figure it out on your own.
So I guess from that perspective, I guess I could still, it still feels a little bit like still motivated, even if because I don't think he actually believed, even in that case, that causality didn't exist. He was more like trying to see if Rand could debunk those things. But then she tells him, like, go outside, try to look for causality. And it seems like even in that case, it would be still motivated. But I guess, I mean, what we were arguing about is kind of an issue of fact of what Peikoff's lecture is. So, I mean, go ahead, all the viewers, go ahead, go watch that lecture. If one of us is wrong, then one of us is wrong on that particular. It's more for me, it was just an example of a bad motivation when it comes to discovering a principle. So
I had a question, but I didn't retain it because I was too deep on this topic.
Let's see if there's something on Discord. What was our list of things?
No, let's check.
It's about a lot of the community. We kind of talked about the current state of Objectivist YouTube community.
But you are linking the community to a fundamental issue you have with Objectivism that not only you have, but you see other people repeating.
What do you mean?
Well, the oversimplification that you're mentioning.
Oh yeah, yep, exactly. I think I think that a lot of times people accept an ideology, and then it leads them to throwing out a lot of other ideologies. One, and another thing being like not properly verifying a like tenet of an ideology or principle before accepting that principle. And then once they accept it, then they have like then once you accept something and now you're trying to verify it later, it's really hard to like go like let's say like you believed in some principle in objectivism for I don't know, I can't think of a good example right now, or let's just say free will. I think I probably agree with free will still. I haven't actually thought about it in a while, but I think I probably still agree with free will, but let's say you're an objectivist, you don't really know about free will yet, but you accepted it right away, just because like you accepted the ideology is all connected, you wanted to accept it now, so you're kind of on shaky ground right away. But after that, you decide, okay, well, now I'm going to go look outside. I'm going to go look for free will. I mean, you're almost necessarily going to find it, right? Because that's what you're looking for. You're not, you're like, you're like, the issue, not sure I agree with issue you is, here, I mean, the issue is, like, you're not going to find something that disproves that in reality. If you're like looking for free will, you're going to almost essentially, like, if you're motivated to find free will, you're going to ignore anything that might disagree with that because you're like trying to find something, if that makes sense.
So I would say this, I don't agree here at this example because I'm more familiar with the argument for free will, because I decided to do a debate on it and I had to study quite a bit for it.
Yeah.
So in this example I don't agree because you can find it, you can find it, and it's not, but I'll tell you this. I'll agree with you in the sense of people outside objectivism, or they're motivated, or I would call it, they have a lens on, where if it's in the matter of social justice, or if it's in the matter of wealth inequality, they have a lens on, and I look at it in this way. and I'm going to describe someone else, and you tell me if this makes sense and if you see it in another place. But I'm not describing objectivists at the moment, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of times with leftist arguments that they see a picture very narrowly, or they see a very narrow view of a picture, and then they form a concept around this narrow view of what's happening in reality. When I say picture, I mean reality. And because it's a narrow view and misses other parts of the bigger picture,
Mm-hmm.
I consider it a half truth.
Yep.
And I'll give an example. So let's take in the Marxist definition of exploitation, you have a transaction between two people, an employer and an employee,
Mm-hmm.
and we are focusing only on the employer. We're not looking at the employee at the moment. Now, in a regular transaction, and you know this from objectivism, it's a win-win exchange where both people only agree if it benefits both of them. So some person, leans in towards the other. The person A leans in a bit towards person B to go there. Person B leans into person A a little bit. They meet in the middle, and both are happy. They both agree voluntarily. Now, the Marxists will only focus on one side of this two people equation. And we say, oh, look, this person benefited from this transaction. Therefore, and ignoring the other person. Therefore, if they benefited, the other person is being exploited.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, this whole transaction is exploitative. And that's just one point. And then they build kind of epistemological foundations on this key block. But this is what I mean by a lens or what you could say a motivation, but I would call it a narrow view of reality. And it's just something I observed because I talk to these sort of people a lot. What do you think? Would you say that objectivists have the same problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true. That especially that Marxist example is definitely the case. I think that is kind of the case anytime that you're motivated to verify the truth of a certain principle that you're given, because anytime that you do that, you're going to have this lens through which you view reality, of I want to find that this principle is true. So because of that, in that Marxist example, they're ignoring other aspects of reality, just to focus in on that one, someone's benefiting, therefore it must be exploitation because world is zero-sum game. You have all these other implicit assumptions built in, but in that case you're still trying to verify that in this transaction there's some exploitation happening, and because of that you're going to use motivated reasoning and selective focus, which is something I talked about in my video, to only narrow in on that and use that as a piece in the puzzle of trying to verify a certain
okay principle. Great. Now keep that thought in mind, Garrett. Now the thing is, when I debate Marxists or socialists, they are at a disadvantage because they narrowly viewed reality and they missed a key bit of it. For me to debunk, in quotations, their position, all I have to do is present the piece of reality that they missed.
Yep, exactly. I think that's a useful something where conversation is incredibly useful. I think sometimes it's easy to become trapped by a certain ideological lens, so you need other people to come in and show you another piece of information that contradicts that, or that adds more context to the piece of reality, the percept or whatever that you're looking at, to help you see oh, hey, maybe I formed this principle based off of this piece of reality. Well, here's this little extra bit that I didn't really notice because I was selectively focused and motivated on trying to prove whatever principle I was trying to prove. So now I have some reason to think that my principle might be false. So yeah, I think that's true.
Have you had situations where someone critiqued a position that you held by saying, look, you missed this other bit of reality and therefore that's why your position is wrong?
Geez, okay. It's tough to do this because I don't want to get
just say
bogged down.
It happens often, never, sometimes, infrequently.
It happens occasionally, sometimes in like the realm of politics, for example. I think I would
Okay.
a lot of times put certain like economic principles of rights um, before like some fact, like that this like something actually makes people more free, actually makes them more happy, but it might require some like violation of rights in that.
Well, this is my area, so if you want
Yeah.
to ask me, go ahead.
Yeah. So, um, I guess for example, one thing, and it's very, very minor, but it like stuck with me for a little bit because it seemed to be like some sort of something that I couldn't really acknowledge properly uh, under my framework would be like, and this is really minor. So if it seems trivial, I understand, but it's like the whole idea that if the government funds contraception, for example, we don't have to
Mhm.
spend as much on the police, and because of that,
What? Whoa, whoa, whoa. What? What'd you get from
um,
A to B?
yeah. So I mean, I've seen studies on that. I can pull up specific examples if you want, but that's the argument that I've heard. Um, And the issue is it doesn't have to be true even in this case because all I'm trying to do here is present like there might be some hypothetical where like there might be some instance in reality where this thing might be it might be true that we can like take less of people's money by spending it on something that where the governments shouldn't be like from an objectivist perspective.
Well, how do you know? The thing is with this guy, is like it's very difficult to draw a causation between what you just said. I mean, you could, and I think I've heard this before
Mm-hmm.
in Eastern European countries that banned abortions, not contraceptions. Um, or I think it's like some kind of it's this thing that economists do where they like take two things and they try to connect them and they try to seem clever about it.
Well,
If someone needs contraception,
the cause isn't hard to understand. It's just the idea that like
the cause is how to justify.
it's not really that hard though, because if more single mothers are having children, then those children are going to grow up in poorer environments and be more likely to commit crimes.
What? So, but how do you know that if is it poor people don't have access to contraception, or is it everyone doesn't have access to contraception?
Um, we could. I mean, it's probably mostly going to be poor people because rich people will have the money to afford that anyway, so they won't probably need
Are we talking about
government
condoms?
spending.
Because that's not super expensive.
It's just stuff like that in general. The issue is, I mean, if there's like a study that shows that like increased government funding on contraception decreases overall government funding because it decreases police spending enough, then it seems like we have a
Garrett, come on,
problem there.
that's a big leap though. I mean, I can appreciate the path that you can then people can imagine that there's a connection, but contraception to like free condoms to more spending on police,
Sure, it's that or like
it's a bit of a
birth control,
stretch.
for example, or anything
Sure,
like that.
I can
I don't
imagine
feel
it.
like that's a huge stretch. I mean, I can try to pull. The issue is more of what I'm arguing. I can try to find a study if you want. It's gonna be hard to find like in a few seconds because I may have
Well,
to
even
read
if you
stuff.
give me a study, I'll question that.
Why would you question that?
When I don't take on faith every single study, I'll read it.
Oh yeah, we could do that. But I guess more the issue would be like if this were true, or if there's something similar that's true, then this would be an example where government funding of something that's not police, military, or courts could lead to could lead to less money being having the government having to spend less money, for example,
But to
which
be complete,
which puts less of a burden on the populace.
I would say this. I mean, let's take your position. Let's say it's true. Let's say if people don't have access to contraception, then a bunch of demon babies come out and the police has to spend time rounding them up.
Hmm.
Right? Like with wings, literal demon babies.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
Just like the Bible predicted.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, it's a joke for my own benefit. So the problem is access to contraception, and if it is too expensive, then poorer people don't have access to it. But if it was cheaper in the free market, lowers the price of things over time and increases the value of things over time through productivity improvements and whatnot, then you can reduce the price. What government could do is remove the tax on them.
Sure, I mean that could help, but the issue too is that like you could
That
do
would
that
be
and then
more of a free
market. spend some of the money that you were gonna spend on the police. You could just spend that on contraception instead.
Well, I wouldn't. In this example, removing taxes is to me it would be a free market approach. Like, don't intervene in the contraception market. It knows what it's doing. People need access to it, and the government putting a tax on it reduces the number of people that have access to these things, or they can buy it less frequently, and then that one time they missed it, so on and so forth. But if you think that's the case, then remove the government intervention and let the free market, let people deal with people.
But then you're going to be spending like more on police than you would have to.
But the thing
which
is,
means that you're
it's in a very black and white. It's in a very black and white scenario, Garrett. I don't buy the assumption. I can understand I can use.
You don't
my
think that it's
imagination.
possible for that to be true?
Again, I can use my imagination to justify a causation on what you're saying, but to say that it is actually the case is a stretch.
But the issue is, it seems like supposing that study were true, if I'd still need to find it, but supposing that thing were true, shit, I had a complete, oh my god, okay, sorry, completely lost my train of thought. Okay, supposing that thing were true, then the government basically would need to spend less money on police, meaning that it takes less of the people's money, or that less or in a voluntary system, like people would have more money to spend on other things.
I could say something completely different. I could say it's not the contraception, it's the education that they receive about it in school.
Sure, that's possible.
And just if I'm opening a number of factors on it, it's already like takes away the black and white scenario that the study is presenting.
Still, in this case,
let me take it a different way.
It would be better if we spent money on that still. But I mean, yeah, it's possible that the study could be wrong.
Let me take it a different way. Yeah, I'm going to give you a black and white scenario. Okay, you tell me what you think is the right thing to do. It's either we severely cut down our fuel burning usage, our plastic usage, or the planet gets destroyed in 12 years. What do you do, Garrett? Huh? What do you do?
Well, you see if there's any other possible side effects. There's only there's other possible side effects. That would be another issue that you need to consider.
Garrett. There are no other options.
Well, then
it's this or the destruction of the planet in 12 years because of you, Garrett. You couldn't sacrifice for the greater good.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, but I guess that let me think.
I like it. You should do that. That's great.
I guess the issue is if there's no other harms presented by spending money on contraception, I guess what would another harm of that be?
Well, because the harm it depends. If you're taking money from some people and giving it to others, there could be some
there's
harm
less
there.
money being taken from people though, because it's coming you need less total money.
So I see. So this is the argument. So you can make a similar argument with homeless people. Let's say, you can say homeless people cost us a lot of money, but if we pay to house them, it's actually less money than policing them or whatnot. Therefore, we should just house all the homeless people, because as a society, it costs us less money. Similar argument.
Yeah, I don't know about the facts, but yeah, a similar argument. Let's go with that, because neither of us actually know the actual studies, but yeah,
it's this kind of arguments that it's like we're already committed. It's like a sunk cost fallacy. We're already committed to solving all these problems. We already have high taxes and high spend, and if we do this and we actually reduce the spend, but to house the homeless people, the government is extremely, extremely inefficient in these large-scale projects. The money will be spent extremely inefficiently. Let's take a real example. LA. LA. I think it was 10 years ago. I think it was 6. I'm not sure. It was between 6 and 10 years ago that the Garcetti, the mayor there, I'm hoping he's the mayor. Excuse me, I don't fully understand you Yankees. But let's say Garcetti said, we want to, or he did actually say, we want to solve the homeless population in Los Angeles. He asked the public for $1.2 billion. They approved it.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was to build 17,000 homes. Now, I'm not exactly sure. I'm pretty sure about the 1.2 billion. I'm not entirely sure about the number of apartments they wanted to build.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was around 17,000 or 19,000. But I do know that the cost per apartment was $546,000. And that it will be built more or less like in downtown LA, because that's where all the other homeless people were. Now, the issue is that there's a whole kind of industry of contractors working with the government, and they're trying to like get, connections to the people who make these approvals about these contracts. And a lot of money was spent. I think most of it is gone. The homeless population obviously now is very severe. It's something like 70,000 people there as of last year, I believe. And they've only built 700 apartments. And they had all these things during the pandemic where you can't have homeless people, like, they have to socially distance and whatnot. So they had these tents on the floor, and they had these painted squares in like a parking lot or something, where like you would set up these homeless tents, and you'd have like a police person guard them or something. And that was $3,000 a day for the city. Mm-hmm. And then you had like all these other options.
So I mean, in that case, then it isn't actually like decreasing police funding or whatever. You're just increasing the amount that the government needs to spend. You're increasing the burden on people, which is not the hypothetical that I'm explaining.
But the reality is that the government does not know how to fix these sorts of problems, especially these big infrastructure projects. They're very, very inefficient. They don't have the same incentives as people in the marketplace that have competition. They don't have any competition. And for example, before I jump to the example, so it's just very difficult for them to say, well, we can fix this whole problem with 1.2 billion, and they outright didn't even scratch the surface. And then a year ago, because like a judge said to the city, I'm not sure if he did say it, but I'm not sure if that's the reason. He said, look, these homeless people are living on the street, they're not social distancing. I'm giving you an order to house all of them in one way or another, even if it's temporary, or else. And I think Garcetti fought in like a higher court against this judgment, but what did happen, I think the governor of California asked for $12 billion to fix resolve fully the homeless situation in California, and he did get approval for that. So we're just spending more and more and more and more and more, and we're not seeing the results.
But then that doesn't even fall into like what I was talking about, the hypothetical of like, suppose that we could spend money on something not under the government's domain, and it would overall reduce the burden of spending.
What do you mean not under the government's domain?
Like contraception, for example.
Right. So I gave the homeless example because it's very common.
Yes, but I don't even know if I like fully agree with that, because then there could be other issues with like, then everyone's going to flee to that area, and you're not actually going to end up like fixing anything.
Well, Garrett, with regards to the contraception, I gave my advice. I don't say you have other factors apart from these two black and white issues like contraceptions and police. There are many factors here. It's very difficult to even draw a correlation between the two, in my opinion. And but let's say you're convinced and you are pro this stance, I would say then, in an imperfect world, lobby the government to remove taxes on contraception.
Mm-hmm. But if spending
and provide education to teenage boys and girls in class, like have something that someone will go to the schools and give them sex education, and so on and so forth. I mean, I don't know. In America, there's religious to not give any education in this area, or yes,
Mm, I don't think
but
they would do that.
you could do that, and you can take that approach. And if you believe that it's better for society, and that's something that you care
Well,
about, then you could do that.
yeah, I guess my thing is it's better for like freedom because people will be able to have more money if they don't have to spend if like not as much is needed to spend on all those programs, then people will have more money to spend just in general because the tax burden would be reduced. So literally
I
all that would have to happen is like police spend money on like contraception and sex education, and then instead, and they don't have to spend that money elsewhere.
Okay, and what if the study is wrong?
If the study's wrong, then the
Or
hypothetical doesn't work.
what if it's implemented in a wrong way?
That's
And they actually end
possible,
up
but then
spending,
the
and they
argument,
actually
but
end
then
up
the
spending more
argument,
money.
but then the argument isn't that like the prescription is incorrect. It's that the actual like implementation's wrong. Like it's still true that you should spend money on money that should have gone to police on contraception or education. The issue is that you just did it in an incorrect way. Like the
Okay,
issue, like
Garrett,
it's not that that's
I
wrong.
think, I think I'll just give my final thoughts on this, and we can jump to another topic.
Mhm.
Because I don't think it's like a strong. You're not like putting your. It's not the hill you want to die on, right? It's just an example.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah, because that's what
Okay.
that's what I was kind of. Yeah, sorry, you can go ahead.
Okay. So I would say this. I would say it's a huge stretch, in my opinion,
Mm.
to say that there's even the vaguest correlation between those two things. It's very much imaginary, and I mean, you could say that lens or that motivation you were talking about that happened here. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a huge stretch in saying like if it's based on such faulty premises, it may not solve the underlying problem, or we don't really know what the underlying problem is to even implement something like that. And if, let's say, the police provide condoms for free, like you said, like a big butch policeman, like
Yeah.
giving you an angry stare and handing you a condom,
Or
use
just
this
like
wisely, son, or something like that, or going to schools, to like high schools, and scaring the shit out of teenagers to not have sex.
But
I don't know.
yeah,
I
you
don't
can
know
keep
what the
going. You
aim
can
is,
keep going. But
yeah, it's. I don't see. I very much doubt there's like a lot of evidence. It seems very much motivated in like a sort of lens, or I don't even know if it's an economic point of view. I would say this would not surprise me if it comes out of social sciences.
mhm.
If it's like a reviewed paper in
Yeah,
social
I guess.
sciences.
Yeah, I guess I have. I mean, I don't want to get too bogged down with one example, but I guess more what I was trying to argue with that example is like the issue is we tend to dismiss studies like that out of hand and say, oh, they must be missing something because of an ideological prescription that comes before.
Okay,
that.
sorry. So if you take the study and you believe it,
Yep.
that it has merit,
Yep.
I did mention some non-governmental ways that you could. Well, one of them was still government, but like some way that the free market could resolve it in society. And you could say in another way that let's say there's a charity for homeless people, a charity,
Could,
nothing to do with the government. And if people give money to this charity, then there'll be less homeless people causing problems that require the police to spend money in the same respect. But it's solved through.
So this improves it a little bit, and that would be one example of something that could improve it. But you could improve it like even more by doing all those things and doing the additional thing that lowers police costs, like, and doing the spending as well.
I don't know. It would be nicer if there was a more concrete example than condoms or condoms for police activity.
Yeah, it would just be like, for example, like you could just take the money that was going to go to the police. Like, let's say the police get like $500 total. Let's just complete absurd hypothetical. And let's say spending $100 on contraception would reduce the police budget by $200. Just like, let's say that this is true. Then I would say take $100 out of that police budget, spend it on whatever contraception, like let's say there's like 5 contraception, or let's say there's 2 contraceptive companies. One is like 60% of the market prefers it, another's 40%. You could give $60 to one of them, $40 to the other one, as to not like distort market prices. And that will reduce the police budget by a certain amount. So then now you have like $300 that you need to spend on the police because the total went down from $500 to $300. And you can give, and then you only spent $100 to do that, so you can give $100 back to taxpayers or whatever, or people who like voluntarily paid into taxation.
Remember you were mentioning oversimplification?
Yes, but this is just an analogy. Like this is just like I'm just saying like this isn't completely like out of the realm of possibility, I guess. Like this is supposing that this were true.
It's not even a likely. It's not even like a 50-50 though.
What do you mean?
You said it isn't out of the realm of possibility, but the possibility could be very low. Sure,
but if it's the case that I'm just giving like a more fleshed out analogy, because if this thing were the case, would you say that the government just shouldn't spend money on this because of a principle that you hold against the government spending things on things other than police, military, or courts?
I don't think the government has any involvement in this, or should have any involvement in this. I think that as a community of people, or as a community of people, if you feel that this evidence is good, and you feel strongly that it can solve some problems that align with your values, then I would say raise a little bit of money, send a large box of condoms to certain high schools in the area, or certain high schools in the country,
mm-hmm.
and tell the kids, if you need a condom, there's one in the boys' toilet, one in the girls' toilet, or in the vice principal's office. Just come and take one, no questions asked. It's provided for free. Don't need like a whole infrastructure thing for it. Just send like an Amazon order or something, a box of condoms, or get a discount from somewhere, and send it directly to the school. Game over.
Yeah, but then here you're kind of just rebuilding like what the government would do, because the government would just...
There could be a wide variety. There could be a wide variety of things that happen in the private sector that save the police activity. For example, if there isn't any food in the shops, and people start rioting in the street, then more police would be needed. But because we solved a lot of the food issues ourselves through the private sector, the police aren't needed.
Yeah, but people aren't gonna do that though. That's the issue. People aren't going to
I'm going to do what?
Aren't gonna get together and buy the condoms. Yeah, they're not.
Why not?
Because
why not?
Well, because they might not know about the study, for example. They might all these sort of things, because people have other things.
But they need someone like you to educate them. If they seem like it's a good idea and they're happy to, let's say they're doing well, and you're asking them, can you just give a bit of money, and this will help, so on and so forth, and it will do these positive things. If you voluntarily agree to give a bit of your money to that, you get a few hundred people. It's buying condoms, for God's sake.
Mm-hmm.
You speak to the vendor to get a discount. Game over. That's it. It's solved.
Yep. So, but then this relies on everybody agreeing to do it.
On people. Yeah, people helping people. Always.
Yeah, and I guess
what's wrong with that?
So the situation would end up being better if force was just involved. I think that's the case.
I disagree completely.
In that situation, let's say you can only raise $50 or whatever, then you're not reducing the taxpayer burden by as much as if you forcefully took 100.
Dude, you can put a page on a crowdfunding site and raise more than $50.
Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like a hypothetical.
No, I don't know
you wouldn't raise as much if you just went around asking a bunch of people, versus if you just took it and then made it so that they actually end up having more money in the end.
Do you see what you're saying here? You want to take it by force because you think you're right about society, and you are the mastermind that can solve these problems.
Sure, but if there is something that, like, in fact,
When has that
reduces
even
the
worked
burden.
historically?
What do you mean?
When has it ever been the case that some mastermind, some committee, some central planner was able to solve issues in society better than people helping other people? That's a legitimate question. There's a whole several sciences and or maybe not scientists, but several like schools of thought that actually investigate these kinds of decisions.
Sure. So I mean, like, education. The best educated people are the countries where, like, the government has more of a hand in education. But I see, this is the issue. We're getting all bogged down on one example.
Let me just explain again. Or your underlying premise that you as a central planner know better how to allocate resources, how to force people to give up more of their money, but as a result, you know that it's better for society because you've seen a study that says that. Yeah, and you're absolutely sure that there's nothing wrong with this study. There's no issues with it, and it will definitely 20 years from now it will definitely solve our problems. But I need to force people to do it. I can't ask them voluntarily. Why not? Why can't you ask them voluntarily? What's wrong with asking them voluntarily?
Because, I mean, a
lot of times
people just won't do it for whatever reason, whether it be laziness or
some people will.
Some people will, but
you don't need that much money though. Some people will.
I mean, depending on how much you need, that's possible, but in the situation where you need a lot more money to fund a certain program that's actually going to make things significantly better even from a freedom perspective.
Even if you need to scale the problem, it's still achievable by talking directly to people. And there are many avenues where you can scale a request, especially nowadays on the internet, to raise money for a good cause. They will evaluate it if it is a good cause, if it is a cause they value. That is on them. But if it is the case that it is a good kind of project that you want to do and it will definitely help, or you think it will, and you're able to persuade people reasonably that it will, then I don't see why you can't raise the money or even a lot of money for it.
Because, like, a lot of times people have, like, one other thing that they might want more than that, and then they'll spend their money on that instead, which ultimately might end up hurting them, but they just don't know that because from one perspective. Right, but
you know better than they do. You know better for their individual life what is good for them. Do you?
Maybe it depends. I don't know. I need a specific context. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think that it's possible that there's situations where it would be better.
Gareth, assume that you do not know for them. Unless they ask you for help and you're an expert in something, assume that you don't know what's good for them.
Sure, if I don't know what's good for them, then I would lean on the side of them keeping their money.
Assume that they know what's best for themselves.
If they know what's best for themselves, then they should just spend their money. But I don't think people always know what's best for themselves.
But you're going to decide for them?
Maybe not me, but I think we should look at, like, just reality and evidence to see, like, what sort of things actually would increase
reality and whose
freedom.
Evidence, Gareth?
What do you mean?
Whose reality and whose evidence are you relying
on? Just whatever, like, studies tend to say, right? Because that's the whole purpose. That's the whole purpose of writing a study, right? To identify a fact in reality, right?
Would you not say that to some degree you're outsourcing your thinking to this group of social scientists?
Possibly, yeah. But if they present something that's, like, valid evidence that shows that.
Sure. Time out. I understood. Time out. A second ago, you complained to me that objectivism motivates you to see reality in a different way, and that's wrong, and it's ideology. You're now giving me an example where you're outsourcing your thinking entirely to someone who produced a study from a social science, I'm assuming, from a social science department, saying there's a connection between and as an example, contraception and police and money spending on the police, and if we increase the money here, it will reduce money there for certain.
Sure, but
And then you say,
like
you know that this because this is a study, I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to read the abstract.
no.
I'm not going
So
to see the methodology. I'm not going to see how many people were involved in this or what kind of study they're basing it on, who is doing it, and if
so
who's funding the study.
it's never going to be more than just like one particular study, right? It's going to be have to be a collection of them. We're trying to
You want to do a
identify what.
meta-analysis? Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, go for it.
So then
Is there a
I feel
meta?
like
Is
there's
there?
no. I don't know. I don't know the specifics of this particular example. I haven't done like a ton of research. It was more
Here's
just a
the question.
hypothetical. Like I think that it's not out entirely out of the realm of possibility that sometimes involving force could increase human freedom.
Here's a here's a question. Oh, sorry, I just had a message about something else.
Mhm.
Um,
I
where
mean,
was I a second ago?
I said that I don't think it's necessarily out of the realm of possibility that that force could increase human freedom.
Okay. So
In general, I still lean on the side of like not using force, but I think that like we shouldn't have this like this disconnected principle that force can never increase human freedom. That's my main point. It's not there's never gonna not like all these. It's not as much determined by all these specifics because it might be true that like it might be true that you're right that like contraception doesn't actually doesn't act like spending on contraception doesn't actually reduce the police budget. That might be the case, but I think that when evaluating situations like this, we should take more of a reality focus rather than putting like some principle
pragmatic
that
focus.
sure that like my principle comes before reality, that my principle that force can never be used, and that we should always prioritize rights over everything. I don't think that we should always
Well, look,
believe that.
let's so I actually do have some experience in this or life experience in this area. I almost never, I would maybe perhaps even say outright never think that government officials know what is better for individuals or how they should be living their life
Mm-hmm.
in general, as a principle.
Yep.
I would say that you need to appreciate that government officials are regular people, rational actors are trying to maximize their own happiness, their own self-interest. They're not
Mm-hmm.
altruists by any stretch. And you need to also look at the incentive structure that government has. For example, it has no competition.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have any incentive to use the money that is collected by force from people efficiently, because if it needs more, it can force people to give them more. It doesn't have any incentive to use that money efficiently on the end result because it doesn't meet. They don't meet or they don't interact with the people that give the money. They're forced to give it. They don't really interact with the people that receive the money because a lot of them are like bureaucrats sitting in an office that never meet anyone,
Mm-hmm.
and they just kind of do like what the politician at the time is kind of telling them to do. They don't have an incentive to solve any particular problem. Now, you could say, for example, look, if they don't solve any problem, then they would lose their election. But it's more the case that the administrators are permanent employees, they're not elected officials. The elected officials themselves, they're not exactly need to satisfy all their electoral, the people who vote for them, sorry. They only need to get 50% of the vote plus one.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, there'll be people who always vote for them, and typically there'll be people who never vote for them. But to get like to cross the 50% threshold, there are certain interest group which they can approach to get them to vote for them or to make a change to the law or make a policy change that will get this interest group to vote for them to cross that 50% line.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, if you study this, what's called political choice theory, you will see that the politicians, the ones that are elected, typically try to service or provide a service to these interest groups because they are the most valuable for them. So It's not the case that the politician um, like serves the people, like they'll give that impression, but they may aggressively pursue those interest groups. Now,
Yep.
you could say in some degree, look, if a politician does nothing at all about what they promised, then they may not get reelected. I could accept that. But enough that they do some of the things they promised, or some of the things that they promised, and some of those things they only took it like incrementally improved it from what it was before. That's technically enough to say, well, this promise has been met. But moving aside from that, because I want to get off this topic and go back to the more on the objectivism side, I have two big questions. One is maybe not Rand,
Wait,
maybe
could I
not
respond to that last thing quickly?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I guess more of what you were talking about, I guess I shouldn't go too in depth because you want to move on, but more, it seems like more of a problem with incentives than like with actual policy that could be enacted. But more my argument is, if there's a situation where force could increase human freedom or the ability for humans to actualize or become happy, then I think that should be a situation where force should be involved, even if maybe the incentives might be wrong, but then that's an argument to fix the incentives, not to discount a policy that would in reality make people more free.
Right, so this is the thing that so you've said with regards to force, you're not convinced that force shouldn't be needed. I understood that. I think force is negative.
I think
especially
in general, yeah, but not, I don't know if it necessarily can always be said to be bad.
I strongly convinced that it is, but that's because of my own experience and also working in government. With regards to the "but we can fix it" argument, I find that hysterical. I do, because it's not from you per se. I had a debate about this, 2-hour-long debate, convincing people that there are market mechanisms for ensuring the quality and safety of certain products, and there's all these mechanisms to do that. A lot of research, and the answer was at the end of it, yeah, but the government is bad, it does all these bad things, but we can fix it. No, you can't. It is fundamentally that way. You and no one else, especially not the government, can fix it. It is just the way it is. There is a reason why objectivists and other libertarians talk about the role of government, because when you extend the role of government, you get these side effects. The government will not change. There's no matter of incentives. I mean, at best, at some of the places that I worked at, you could have some KPIs. I'm not sure if you know what that is, but like metrics you have to meet in for the administration and the bureaucratic parts of the government. But right now, I mean, in the UK they had some of that. I don't know what it is in America, but right now, it's just fundamentally broken. And the only thing it's good at is force, is police, is courts, the army. They're amazing at. The government's always very good at the army. But everything else, it's like applying army principles and police principles and court principles to other areas of the economy, what they may, or they almost never really work. But just fixing it is super naive, in my opinion. But it's a very deeply held belief, and it's not. And the reason why it's a deeply held belief, in my opinion, the root cause of this, and watch me do some essentializing in real time, is because people like the concept of collectives. Like, the collective must be good, in a sense, or like if you come from a religious background, like the society or the collective is naturally a good thing, and government is part of that. Like, that's like a sort of collective. So, for example, a contrast would be an individual in the marketplace only looking for themselves, greedy, willing to dump toxic waste in someone else's garden to make a bit more, like a dollar more, versus the angelic, altruistic people in the government that can do no wrong, and if they did do any wrong, they didn't mean it. that are leading the group into the right direction. It's a sort of like mentality
Mm-hmm.
that I see like imprinted on the government, where in essence it's still a bunch of rational actors that are trying to maximize their own self interest, happiness. It's not like every single one is altruistic, and in my opinion, the worst ones are the altruistic ones because they're the least honest ones.
Hmm.
But anyway, can I move on to a Greg Salmieri question?
Yeah, let's do that because as much as I want to like keep responding, it's just gonna become like,
We can do a
yeah,
debate on this if you like.
yeah.
I do debates.
I guess my issue isn't necessary. Yeah, I'll have to find something, research a little bit on it, and because I kind of came into this just presenting a hypothetical more so. But yeah, I think let's
Yeah, I mean,
talk
but
about this more.
so yeah, I have more like experience that I could build around your hypothetical,
Mm-hmm.
and I can do it in, you know, as you saw, I did it kind of like on the spot because it's not super
Yeah.
difficult for me at this stage. But with regards, so Greg had has like a how to think objectively course.
Mm-hmm.
So some of it's on YouTube, some of it's in ARI. Um, and my wife was listening it the other day, and it seemed to me that your position about oversimplification and just, you know, taking things on faith because you believe in the ideologies. When you look at Greg's course, it's like it basically thinking is really hard. You have to do a lot of work, and if you don't do that, then you can't say that you know it for sure. So, for example, he gives he gives an example where you were born in a particular area where it's mainly secular or atheist, and you go to a school and you study science, but you in the science lesson you're just told to believe something, you don't verify it, like in physics you're just told to believe something, to memorize something, you don't know how it came about. And he says it's the same thing as being born in Pakistan and going to a madrasa there, and they say, well, God exists, just take it on for, just memorize these things. It's essentially to the context of epistemology, it's the same thing. So you have to do the work and verify things, at the very least inductively reach a stage where you understand these concepts and can then apply them further on and build, you know, epistemological foundations or levels on top of them. And if you listen to his course, it's actually quite depressing. It's like, whoa, my God, thinking is super hard, intensive, time consuming, energy consuming. And if you even half coast through life, you're doing it wrong. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I got a little lost in. Sorry, I was a little distracted during some of that, but I think yeah, it makes sense. I think it's true that thinking is difficult. Um, I guess yeah.
Because
What was the?
this is the same objectivism that you're talking about,
Hmm.
saying that you know, people just take things on faith. Rand does these oversimplifications, and you don't understand why, and you take it on faith. And here is Greg Salmieri saying, look, don't take it on faith. And to be honest, I think Rand and Pike do as well. Don't take it on faith. Inductively reach these conclusions. Try to figure out examples from reality. Like, you need concretes. We're in our conversation, we're completely
Mm-hmm.
missing the concept of concretes
Yep.
entirely. And that's a very strong element. And even like if you form a high level concept, it still needs some concretes to it. So I'm not entirely convinced that I can appreciate like the sentiment you said at the start, but I mean, Greg is part of objectivism.
Yeah, but I don't think he's wrong on that. I think a lot of times objectivism, I mean, explicitly argues for a decent method with with certain aspects like this. It argues that you should like go out and discover things by concretes, but like in the actual implementation of learning objectivism and objectivists, people tend to accept the philosophy as a whole and then not actually go out and like try to like accept it as a whole and then not actually go out and try to verify or go out and
So you're
verify
saying,
after they've already like agreed with a certain thing.
so you're saying you're noticing something where junior objectivists, let's say for argument's sake, or are you saying senior objectivists?
It's possible that it happens with them too. I don't. Yeah. I think I'm skeptical when people like adopt the entire philosophy.
I understood. You mentioned. So let's say you're noticing a trend where I'm going to say junior objectivists jump to conclusions, essentialize a bit too quickly, oversimplify and miss some nuance. And you're saying this is because of objectivism and we need to...
It's because of like the presentation as a like closed system, I guess.
What's the connection to it being a closed system? I don't understand. You've mentioned it a few times.
Or it's basically the idea that it's like a entire set of principles. Right. That you have to accept all at one as one rather than like you can take a few things here and there. Similar to how like objectivists treat other philosophies. Like, oh, there's some good, there's some bad.
How can you accept it all as one when you may not understand all of it or you may not have references to reality for all of it?
Well, I think that's what people do because it's told, like they're told that you can't accept the ethics without accepting all the other fields.
But they also say that this is connected to that, but for you to appreciate a concept in ethics, you need an example. You need a concrete. You need an example from reality. You saying that when you find these examples of reality, you're motivated to find them, and they're not true.
Anyways, so yeah, I know.
Garrett?
Sorry, I'm just trying to think about what you said. Sorry, when you find these examples in reality, you're motivated to think that they're not true.
So you mentioned before about motivation.
Yep, exactly.
So it's the concrete from reality isn't true because you were motivated to find it, or half true.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily false. I think that you just got there by a bad method, and it's like there's no reason to think that it's true yet, so you probably shouldn't believe it yet.
Well, what your eyes see it, you smell it, you touch it.
But like the Marxist sees that someone's benefiting from a transaction, that's something that they're seeing. So then they're seeing exploitation. That's what they think they see.
Right, but I said the Marxists are opening themselves up to be debunked in this context.
Yep, and I think that's a similar thing when you just go out and verify principles that you already believe.
Why do you think that objectivists skip like... So we have the percepts, we see percepts from reality. Why do you think that they abandon reason, applying logic, applying reason to form concept stage? Because they're motivated by the ideology to skip it, or what?
Yeah, I think they're motivated to accept it as a whole system. We're kind of going in circles here.
No, but I'm just trying to clarify, pinpoint in the process where you're saying it's going wrong.
Yeah, so, I think that's the problem because they're told to like accept it as a whole and not like, and that all other ideologies are just not like good under objectivism.
And this cult-like adherence causes them to skip the whole reason and logic phase and just jump to the conclusion they were looking for to begin with.
Not necessarily, but I think this often does happen.
Often enough to be an issue.
Yes, because I think any time where you present it as like an all or nothing thing, you're going to be motivated to accept it as an all or nothing thing, if that's how the philosophy is presented.
Well, the way I see it, for example, I don't know all of objectivism. There's a lot of parts I don't understand, and like I can read it, but I don't. Like I won't.
But then, but if you read something in objectivism, do you believe it's true?
I would try to understand what they mean by taking an example from reality. If I have an example,
but you have and
it makes sense, then I'll map it to that example.
But if you don't have an example, do you just
then
say,
I don't understand?
Oh, this probably isn't true. You look for something else.
Even if I think it is true, I don't know how to apply it.
What do you mean? You can think that it's true without having an example of it being true, without having something in reality for it to be true?
So let's say someone gives me advice, but I don't know how to make use of this advice. I said, this is true. This is how things happen in the world in the form of an advice. But because I have no experience and I don't know how to apply it, then when like some kind of similar example presents itself, I may not understand the concept well enough to know what to do in that moment. So I'm not absorbing it. Like I read it intellectually, but I didn't recall it, and I don't know how to apply it.
Yep, I think I agree with that. But do you still believe that it might be true, or are you're like still biased to believe that it's true, right?
I don't. Well, I assume that it's true. I just don't know that it is true.
Well, then what's the point of that assumption? I think that's the problem. Like the assumption that it is
So
true.
I'm going towards your example. So I'm saying in this case that I'm assuming it. I don't know if I will or will not assume that it is true, but for argument's sake, for your example, I'm saying I may assume that it is true. Even if like it makes sense in the classroom, it makes sense when I listen to something, it makes sense in a book I'm reading. Because I don't have any reference for it in reality, I don't know what to do with it yet. And it could be the case that I could need to just experience more life more, read the book a second time. It's like, oh, now I understand it.
Well, but if you're like, I guess that's the issue though. If you're coming in like with that bias that it's like assumed to be true, you're gonna tend to selectively focus on things that make it seem true.
But I think um, the connection to reality is what stabilizes the system of thought here. Like you can assume that it is true, you can believe that it is true. If you run into an example in reality when it's not true, then you're gonna start questioning the system. If but if it is helpful to you, so let's say you got an example from reality, you were biased about it, and you applied something, and you know it did work out, then oh, maybe there's something here. Maybe I don't fully understand it yet, but the advice seemed to pan out, and maybe I should just study it more because I don't fully understand yet. But again, there are a lot of parts in objectivism I simply do not understand yet.
But
I started
that word yet
studying
just seems,
epistemology. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, that word yet just seems dangerous, I guess, because it's
Well,
like you're
I haven't
you're
studied it.
assuming that you will believe in all the things that objectivism presents
Well,
later on.
I haven't studied all the parts yet. I haven't yet
But
studied
you're
them
like,
to know.
yeah, sorry, maybe I
So
misheard.
far, so good. I mean, I'm not complaining. But I have been in systems again. I have been in philosophies that it worked for the majority of the time. A lot of it made sense. A different one than objectivism. A lot of it made sense. And then I ran into like a core part of it that I just could not figure out. Didn't make sense. Consulted with some people on the internet. They were like, "Yeah, you're doing this wrong." Someone else gives a completely different advice. You're doing that wrong. Then a third person, "This is actually what's wrong with the whole philosophy. We need to like sit and think about this." And at some point, it's like, look, I can't apply this to reality. This doesn't make sense to me. In these other parts, it was very helpful, but over in this part here, it was completely bad and didn't map to reality at all. I abandoned the philosophy.
Yeah, I guess maybe that perspective of just accepting a philosophy and then like going from there, and then if like one thing turns out to be wrong, just abandoning it. Maybe that's like the dangerous thing. Maybe you should just pick and choose from different philosophies the things that are valuable and then integrate
Um,
them afterwards.
it's difficult because the philosophies come with like a set of principles that may not overlap very well, or you'll have to compartmentalize it severely, and I don't think it's practical to do so. Philosophies come with an idea. If you can live, so let's say the philosophy that I abandoned, let's say I modernize it, let's say I take out a part, let's say I take out a part I didn't like, I may not necessarily know which part I should put in that will work well together. So a
But I think
closed system is preferred.
but I think it's probably better to compartmentalize and just believe all the things that seem to be true than accept one thing that's true in a philosophy and then accept everything else because it's a closed system and you know that one part's true, so you have to accept everything else.
Well,
It's more
I would
it's
say
better to compartmentalize at first and then integrate it all later, basically, because then at least you know that the principles that you're adopting are true.
I think to
And if
some
they're true, then they must integrate eventually, right?
I think to some degree, if you would have to compartmentalize even objectivism because you can't absorb everything at once. So you'd have to start somewhere and ignore other parts that you aren't familiar with yet, or haven't studied yet. And even in the case of the other philosophies that I was using, I mean, I, I took it to a point where I couldn't go any further. It didn't make sense to take it further.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I had like a very big split. For something happened, and not tragic, but something happened, and I really questioned it. And again, I asked for advice, and advice wasn't satisfactory, and like it just didn't work out. But I'll take on I'll take on your points. I don't fully agree with everything, but I value the discussion, and you know, us digging deep into the core
Mm-hmm.
issues that you and I disagree on. So at least, you know, they're exposed out in the sunlight,
Mm-hmm.
and we can have conversations about them. So I think that's very valuable in conversation. I would like to ask you something else about ethics. You said you that's the part you really like. Do you and you know, objectivist ethics is a bit different. It's more like than other ethical systems that have like a sort of, you know, a Kantian deontology or something. Here in objectivism, you're more on the virtue ethics side. You're trying to improve your life. You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
obtain the values that you want. Could I ask, have you taken the time and done some introspection as to what values you want to obtain? What are your goals in life? What is your purpose in life? Written it down, planned how to obtain them, things of that nature?
Yeah, I think I definitely have done that. Just
Do you
like
find
writing out like a plan for my life or like the things that I want out of life. Yeah, definitely.
I don't know about plan for your life, but at the very least, like
Yeah,
an overview,
yeah, I
a
think yeah,
direction.
yeah,
You found have Did you find that valuable?
yeah, absolutely. I don't have a ton of problems with the objectivist ethics. Maybe like
Okay,
one
what?
at the outset, like I don't know if life is necessarily the best standard of value. I think happiness could be better, but that's a whole other thing.
Okay. In addition to planning it out, have you had situations where you introspect at the end of the day and said, "Did I today? Do you introspect? Did I today act as virtuous as I could be? Was I rational as I could be? Was I was my not my integrity to carry things out, was that done well?" And kind of like evaluate your behavior if it lives up to your virtues and standards.
Yeah, I think I try to do that. Maybe not in those exact like terms, but yeah, I think generally I do try to introspect and make sure that I'm like actually adhering to the values that I like want to pursue and have a good course of life.
So I think the positive thing here is with objectivism and objectivist ethics is that it's very actionable,
Mm.
and it's not something that you study what is ethical in some sort of class in college and forget about it entirely. It's something you practice every day, once a day, once a week, once a month, once every 6 months. But
Mm.
it's like it's like an action that you take, and you
Mm.
introspect on it, and it's not just this thing out there in the ether or in society that you you should behave good. This is how you behave good. If you do this, you're bad, or you feel bad when you've done
Mm.
something bad every once in a while. Like you think about what you want, you go after it, you improve your habits. I think this is extremely valuable and unique
Mm.
from other philosophies. At the very least, like the only other similarities would be, you know, virtue ethics from Aristotle or something similar.
Mm. Yeah, I think I'd probably agree with that. Just yeah, I really do enjoy Rand's philosophy. Just like thinking that, or her ethics, thinking that like yeah, happiness is the most important thing, I guess, or like thinking that happiness is like your purpose in life. Yeah, I think that's important because yeah, a lot of times we live in a very altruistic world where people expect you to like sacrifice that and yeah, live very like second-handedly oftentimes, and that's I mean that's kind of how I grew up, just like always trying to think very second-handedly about things and not
So
necessarily thinking about my own happiness. But yeah, I think you're right.
so this part of objectivism you have integrated, and you're pleased with the results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, you know, that's good. That's something.
Yep.
And it's good
I just
from
think that the yeah. Sorry, what were you gonna say? I cut you
it's
off
good
there.
from your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
If it is good for you.
Yeah, I'm not. I want to say this. I'm not like anti-objectivist or anything. I think probably my biggest maybe my biggest differences come in politics. We'd have to hash that out a lot more because I was not prepared to have a political discussion today. But yeah, I think that might be where my biggest differences come. But even then, I think I'm still very, like, I just think the purpose of politics is, I mean, ultimately ties back to ethics, which I do feel very strongly about, is just like creating a society in which I am able to best, I and other people as well are best able to like maximize their happiness.
I can solve your problem with politics right now.
Sure.
Go work for the government.
Yeah, I think I
would agree.
I would agree. The government
Just get it all out of you in one go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the government in its current state is definitely very. I mean, it's definitely not motivated by freedom. I would definitely agree with that. But I don't know if just a pure, like,
not even
rights.
Freedom, just sit in the meetings. Just sit in the meetings. That's all you need, man. I'm telling you. Just take like 3 months out. Say, look, I want to try out the government for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't.
It was horrible, man.
Yeah.
You won't believe the stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have been thinking about like trying to get into like more local politics stuff, but that's a whole other aspect of my life, which I don't know if I'm not at an age yet where I care enough about like the city that I live in, because right now I'm in. I don't know if I'm gonna actually end up living in like Lincoln, Nebraska for the rest of my life, or like my hometown either. Like I don't think. So now more I'm just trying to involved in like student government stuff, but that's a whole other thing.
That's the lightweight stuff. You haven't reached the deep bureaucracy.
Yeah, exactly. I think
it's still fun. It's still fun on that level. You know, you're doing stuff. You're like kind of like the Boy Scouts or something. You're doing stuff together in activities. When you reach the hardcore bureaucracy where you have meetings about having meetings, that's when you've reached something.
Yeah, I think I do definitely think there's a lot of like overcomplication in the government. If there's like, I think in general I do agree with the principle that like if some policy is too complicated, the government's not going to be able to do it right.
I do like sorry I cut you off. I do like Rand's position on laws, where she says if a law is too subjective, where you reach a point where the judge has to make a decision anyway, just don't have the law at all, or could be a reason where that you shouldn't have a law. I thought that was very
exactly.
interesting.
I'm very pro on like objective, very just like this is the law and that's like what it is. So like, yeah, I don't know, but if I were, we could get more into politics on a different day, because I think there are things where I disagree. Maybe because I do think I guess one thing where I disagree would probably be taxation with Rand. I don't really believe voluntary taxation. I believe that there's like philosophical justifications for actual like forced taxation, but although
I'd love to hear it. I mean, I would say so. Obviously, we can do this another time. I would say this. I started out as a lefty, obviously, because I told you I was vegan, and I've reached the more liberal free market kind of place from experience, and I would say I'm somewhat passionate about them, but I started on a different path when I started life, and I've reached here through certain experiences, through certain observations and insights about how the market works and how politics work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I probably don't disagree with you that much on economics. I just think I do agree that like in general a free market solution is probably best. Although I guess my only disagreement would be at times I think force might be necessary to like maximize happiness in people or like individual freedom. But I guess I need to do some more like specific mining on that.
Maybe the only force you should apply on an individual is individual applying force on him or herself through self-discipline.
Maybe. Beat yourself.
The only force you can do is you on yourself. That's it.
Just like absolutely. Like, I think the best way forward. I think the best way to be happy is cutting when you feel bad at night.
And on that note, Gareth, of cutting, when you feel bad.
Yep.
Sorry. Cutting the conversation, we mean, obviously.
Yep. Oh,
Cutting
absolutely.
it towards the end. Yeah, that's
I'm
what we
feeling
mean.
tired, so I'm gonna.
Don't you have some kind of game?
I
or
do,
something?
but I'm more like, I feel like around maybe like an hour or 30 minutes ago, like there was a point. Remember when you like said something and I just like didn't say anything? I've been feeling like very mentally exhausted. It's been a long day. I had an exam today, but yeah, I don't want to like sound like I'm complaining or anything, but.
Okay, well, I'll catch you in a more fresh mood or fresh state, and we can argue about things like politics or economics or what you would like. But thank you very much for the conversation. I think it was super useful, and I enjoyed myself.
Absolutely, yeah.
And obviously, I hope the listeners did as well. And it's a bit late for me, but if you want to keep talking to your stream, that's fine. But I will say good night, and again, thank you very much.
Yep, great talking with you. It's been fun to lay out some of these positions with criticism for like the first time ever, because I don't really argue against I don't have an opportunity in my life to argue against objectivists. So thank you so much. It was great talking with you.
Cool. And yeah, let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Recording stopped.
Awesome. So yeah, that was a great conversation. Great guy. Make sure I put his stuff down in the chat below. There should be a link to his channel down there. Yeah, it's been a great show. Great talking with him. Interesting to try to lay out some of my new thoughts, new ideas. Yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun talking with him. But yeah, so thank you all for watching. Hope you all have a great rest of your night. I'm about to go play some sport ball. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I feel mentally drained right now. Let's just say that. I had 3 classes. Well, whatever. I don't want to like complain and be like, oh my god, I feel mentally dead right now. Whatever. Screw it. But yeah, thank you all for watching and have a great rest of your night. Peace.